Well, we'd like to thank you all for coming and joining us for another presentation. Today we have Tom Nolan, who actually retired recently from JPL, but he was there so long that he had some unique experiences and can share programs that we don't think about anymore up to the present day items that we have going on here at the lab. So he can give us a unique perspective from some of the projects that we've done over the years. So Tom is a great guy. He'll answer some questions for us at the end that have been submitted. So here we go. Tom, go ahead.
Be great. Thank you, Michael. I sure appreciate being here with the students and the teachers and with you, Michael. You do such a great job running these sessions for all of us here, so I really appreciate it. Today's presentation is going to be from the Apollo generation to the Artemis generation. Go, baby, go. In my life, I'm part of the Apollo generation. I'm 66 years old. As Mike said, I just retired from JPL in January of this year. But the Apollo generation was the first time so many things had been done. It's a great generation to be part of. But so is the Artemis generation. The things that we did as Apollo first, you're going to do different things as the Artemis generation first. And I'm so excited. I'm going to be, I tease, I'm going to be on a rocking chair on my front porch as you guys do all the great things you do for Artemis. And that's where the Go Baby Go comes from. Because everyone in my generation wants you to be wildly successful, further than any imagination could possibly be, as you take on the challenges that will come from going to the moon and to Mars and beyond, because that's what Artemis is about. So in 2025, we're going to be back on the moon with the first woman landing on the moon and the next man landing on the moon. And then we'll build a colony on the moon. And then from there, we'll go out to Mars, and using what we learn on the moon colony, we'll go and start a Martian colony as well. So there are several guide words that I've used in my career that I'll give you a little bit of dad advice, I guess, is what I would call it, for your careers.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
T-minus 60 seconds and counting. We are go for Apollo 7 at this time.
And from the crew of Apollo 8, we close with good night, good luck, a Merry Christmas, and God bless all of you on the good Earth.
We have ignition sequence start. Engines on 5, 4, 3, 2.
Listen, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. We leave as we came, and God willing, as we shall return, with peace and in hope for all mankind. We're on our way, Houston.
From 1969 to 1972, we had, a total of 6 moon landings. 12 humans walked on the surface of the moon. We have elevated the human condition. We have improved human lives. We have raised the standard of living for every person on Earth because of space exploration. We're going to go back to the moon, and we're going to take what we learned there, and we're going to go to Mars.
Because they're very, very different places, but we're going to be going to both. And I hope some of you will be going to do these explorations with us. So President Kennedy said we choose to go to the moon this decade and do the other things not because they're easy, but because they are hard. I want you to pay attention to that because all great achievements take hard work. If it's easy, it's not worth doing. If you're sitting on the couch only playing video games, it's not worth doing, other than just relaxation. But we do the things that are difficult because that's what moves the experience of being human far forward in our pursuit of knowledge of science, medicine, mathematics, social conditions. Everything we do, we want to stretch our abilities to be the best humans we can be, to take care of each other better than we could ever be before. So next slide, please. There were a lot of people that thought this was a huge waste of money to go to the moon. Why do we even want to bother going to the moon? So most of it was it cost too much money. The other part is you're crazy. That was a big part. Why would anybody strap their body onto a rocket and fire off from the Earth where we're safe? Thankfully they're very brave men and women that are willing to do that. But at that time, they just thought it was nuts. And then the other one is there are starving people here on Earth. Why do we waste our money and spend it on other things? Why don't we take care of everyone here on Earth until Earth is perfect, and then we could go somewhere else? That isn't the way the human exploration works. That's not the way the human mind works. That's not the way our need to move our advances forward. But there's different people with different opinions on that. Next slide, please. This is the one that I love, is man was not meant to fly. I don't know if you guys have heard, but back in the days when we first had trains crossing your country and our country, the people were told, don't get on that train because the human body will fall apart because the trains move too fast. The body was not meant to handle the speed of a locomotive train. And now you see us flying everywhere at many different speeds, supersonic speeds for many of our fighter craft and things like that. So we're moving at a rapid rate. And then, of course, as we go to the moon and we go to Mars, we go to the International Space Station. As we orbit the Earth, we're going 27,000 miles an hour just to stay in orbit. That's an awfully high speed. So it's amazing what we used to think and what we've learned by using human space travel. We've learned marvelous things, great advances. And every day on the space station, the astronauts are learning more about how humans handle long-term living in space. I don't know if you realize, but this is the year that people have been living in space for 20 years. The space station has been operational with the changing crews on it, but people have been living in space for 20 years now, and that's never going to end. I think that's a marvelous fact. Next slide, please. Whatever you're trying to do, there'll be people that will try and talk you out of it. They'll criticize you. And I think we should not back away from criticism. There are always those that are willing just to criticize and not really build up as far as we are going in our new advances we want to go to. So if like for instance, people that are trying to work on the COVID vaccine, I think that's a terrific thing, and we need to keep at that as hard and fast as we can go to come up with those things. But there are people that are saying, oh, you're wasting your money, you're spending too much money, it's going to take too long, it's not going to work. All these criticisms come out, but we need that vaccine. And so I'm thankful to all the first responders, nurses, doctors that are working on this to make this a reality, to get rid of this pandemic that we have. Next slide. This is one of my favorite sayings. Earth's gravity is strong, but not strong enough to hold our imaginations, no, our rockets. We've been launching spacecraft for many, many decades now, and we get better at it all the time, including, and I want to give a special shout out to SpaceX and Elon Musk for their incredible launch this week and landing and getting that first stage back. I'm standing up applauding them because that's a marvelous thing, and they're a great organization that we work with NASA, and they work with us, and that collaboration is just advancing everything that humanity wants to do because of that partnership. So I'm really thankful for that. But the part of this statement that I want to have you pay attention to, it's not strong enough to hold our imagination. Much more powerful than any rocket is your imagination, your mind that's in between your ears. That's by far the most powerful thing that we could ever use to advance the human condition here on Earth. And we all want to advance the human condition for all people over across all the Earth. I don't care what country you're from. I don't care what education you have. I don't care anything other than, do we treat people properly, and do we take care of each other? Do we take care of Earth? Earth is a beautiful place and works very well. And we've done some things that are good for Earth and some things that aren't. But we can do better, and we need to do that. As we go and explore the rest of the universe, we go and explore more about Moon and Mars, we need to take care of them. We can't contaminate either one of those. That wouldn't be a good thing to do. So we have to take care and clean up our Earth and take care of things that are out there in space. Next slide. Yuri Gagarin, the first human in space. We have Yuri Night. I don't know if you guys celebrate it down there. We do here in America. But he was the first human to ever go into space. He made one orbit around the Earth. Now, that sounds like a very small trip. But can you imagine how brave that was at the time? And then in the right side of these pictures, too, is Valentina. She's the first woman. And just in the short time, she completed 48 orbits, not just one orbit. What a brave woman. I'm so proud of her and the things that the Russians have been able to do. And we've done good things, too. But still, the courage it takes to do what these people have done, I admire them very much. Next slide. So these are some of the sayings I like to say with you. The impossible is temporary. At NASA, we do the impossible every day. So many things are impossible, we can't do it. But look what happens if we keep at it. It does become possible. So the impossible is temporary. So it was impossible to put a man on the moon. Look what happened. You know, it's impossible to do many, many things, and yet we do it anyway. Another saying that I like is to pursue and persist until you achieve. I want to tell you a little bit about me. I've been at JPL for 22 years and love my career, but school was very hard for me. I did not do well in school. I'm not saying that to be prideful of the difficulty I had, but I want to encourage you, any of you students that struggle, keep at it. Do not give up. There are times when I wanted to quit, but my teachers and my parents wouldn't let me. They said, we know you can do this. We believe in you. Keep going. Do not give up no matter what. I want to offer that to you students also, that do not ever give up. That's the only way you can fail. There's no failure when you put in the effort. And if you pursue and you persist, you certainly will achieve. I guarantee it. Another saying is to dare mighty things. That comes from one of our previous presidents, Teddy Roosevelt. But we have to dare mighty things, to go boldly forward where we haven't been before. I think it's very important to push our minds and our abilities to doing things that seem impossible, but we just make them happen. Next slide, please. So, Michael, my screen is off. So will you read this for us?
Far better is to dare mighty things, to win glorious triumphs, even though checkered by failure, than to rank with those poor spirits who neither enjoy nor suffer much, because they live in a gray twilight that knows not victory nor defeat. Theodore Roosevelt.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate that. The failure is going to happen no matter what, but it's not permanent. It's temporary. Failure is knowledge you're learning on the way to success. So if an experiment doesn't work or a spacecraft, doesn't achieve all of its goals, I don't call that failure. That's a temporary setback. It's not permanent. I think that on our way to success, we have to endure failure. If you guys know Walt Disney or his story, he failed at many businesses long before he came up with Disney Studios. And look how successful Disneyland, Disney World, Disney everything is, and Disney's everywhere. It's all because he never gave up. And he just kept going on and on. The same is true with so many scientists and so many doctors. They're going to keep going. And so do not be afraid of the word failure. I failed courses in college even, and I had to go back and take them over again. Again, I'm not bragging on that. I don't want that to, be what you guys want to achieve, but it did not hold my back. I was not going to allow it to define me, and I don't want anything like that to define you either. I've had wonderful successes in my life, in my career, that are far beyond my imagination could ever have taken flight before. But I'm so thankful that I was around people that said, keep going, keep going, keep going, and never, ever said to stop. Next slide. Start by doing what's necessary, then do what's possible, and suddenly you're doing the impossible. I believe that each of you can do the impossible. I know it's at JPL, we do the impossible all the time. Same thing at NASA. So even though it's difficult and seems impossible, I want you to understand that it is not truly impossible, but it is possible if you just persevere at it. Next slide. This is a fact that just amazes me completely. In 1903, the Wright brothers were the first humans to ever fly. Neil Armstrong in 1969 put his foot on the moon in just 66 years after that first flight. I'm 66 years old right now. And in my lifetime, to go from the Wright brothers to Neil Armstrong was impossible. But look what they did. They did it so wonderfully. And I'm so thankful for those achievements that should encourage you to continue to do the difficult things. It was impossible to fly. Check that one off. The Wright brothers did it. It's impossible to get to the moon. Check that one off. Neil Armstrong did it. It's impossible to walk on the moon. Check that one off. Neil Armstrong did that too. Buzz Aldrin did the same thing. And all in a very short time. Next slide. It began with our Mercury pilots. They actually were test pilots for most of them. That's what had. They were all flyers, and they were very, very brave men. Just getting in the cockpit of a test airplane is brave enough. And then they got on these rockets that are full of fuel that are going to launch them out into space, hurl them out there, and no one had done that before. What bravery. And then the objectives. I'll go through a couple of sections of our missions that made us get to where we are today. But the objective is to place a manned spacecraft in orbital flight around the Earth. That's the first step. It is no good to go to the moon or Mars and beyond if you can't even just orbit the Earth. So we started with just one spacecraft that is manned, and can we go around the Earth? And then we had to see, what does that do to our bodies, and how can we perform, and how can we function in the environment of space? It's different in microgravity. It's different when we're out there in space. And so can we do the things we need to do to get back safely to Earth? And then, of course, we have to get the manned spacecraft back to Earth. That's safety is something that we always have to consider. It does no good to launch somebody out and say, ta-ta, see you later. That's not anything that anyone's going to want to do. Next slide. So after Mercury, we went to Gemini, and it's a bridge between Mercury and the Apollo missions. There are 4 objectives: test an astronaut's ability to fly long-duration missions, which was up to 2 weeks in space. Now we have people that lived on the space station for over a year. But back then, 2 weeks in space was a really long time. And then we have to understand how the spacecraft could rendezvous and dock around the Earth and at the moon. So we knew we would have multiple spacecraft, and they have to be able to connect up together. So, for instance, Elon Musk this week, what would happen if he wanted to get to the space station and could not get there? Other than the accident or something. We don't want that to happen. But he did a flawless job, and his whole SpaceX team did a great job of getting them to the space station, in the space station. They're going to be there for 6 months. What a great thing. They're going to learn so much and come back with terrific knowledge. I think that's going to be a great, great mission for everybody. And then they have to perfect the re-entry and landing. Russia lands on land up in northern Russia. We, as Americans, land in water. And so there are 2 different ways. They still are landing back on Earth, but we do it differently. Now, the last several missions, we've had to land in Russia because we had no ability of America to take off and bring back the astronauts. But now, with Elon Musk this last week, we certainly are able to do that, and we'll do it more and more, because our goal is to be able to have missions that come from and return to America. Next slide, please. This is a first spacewalk. Look to the left. He's got a tether there. That the only thing that holds him from being, taken off into space is that thin ribbon. I admire him, because I don't know that I look at, if I held that ribbon in my hand, I'd say, is this thick enough to really keep me, connected to the spacecraft? And of course, I'm sure it was and is, but it's one of the things that I would question, being a scaredy cat that I am. Next slide. So then on the Apollo mission, this is the culmination of what we have been doing, preparing, getting up with Mercury and Gemini and then Apollo. 6 of the missions, well, we want to get then humans out on the moon and then back to Earth, but 6 of the missions were successful. 7 and 9 orbited the Earth because we were just testing the modules, the spacecraft. We want to make sure they work before we really sent people out there. And then 8 and 10 tested various components. But 13, you may have seen the movie Apollo 13, they had a lot of trouble on board, and they almost didn't get back. I'm so glad they did, but they had a malfunction, and it was very dangerous and sobering what they had to go through, and it must have been very nerve-wracking for the astronauts, and certainly was for people here on the ground as well. Next slide. Here is the command module. There are 3 astronauts that fit into this. There are actually 3 spacecraft in this system. The command module is what's pictured here. a service module is what pushed this command module around and had all the fuel and the navigational thrusters to move it around. And then there was the lunar module, Eagle, that actually landed on the moon. Next slide. This is a picture of the service module and the command module on the right. See the right side, the cone-shaped, that's the command module where the astronauts, lived and drove everything. But behind it is the propulsion units to steer it and get it to actually land on the moon. Next slide. This is the lunar module. There are two parts to it. The top part has all the crew in it, and the bottom part is the landing part that stayed there on the moon. And these two separate off, so only the top half launched from the moon and the bottom half stayed. Next slide. Here's the controls that the astronauts have to be able to see. One of the funny stories that I've heard over the years, when John Glenn, one of our early astronauts, they kept checking his vision because they weren't sure, with the lack of gravity being the same, if our eyes would misshapen and go blurry so he couldn't see the controls. See how many switches there are here? What are the chances he could not see if his vision was blurry, and he couldn't see to push the button that's the second from the right rather than the third from the right. So he had to have that sharpness. Thankfully, they kept checking his vision the whole time, and his vision was flawless the entire time. So when we're out in space, our eyes are not compromised. They can see everything perfectly fine. But that's one of the medical things we had to learn along the way. We didn't know what would happen, and then we found out by trying it. Next slide. So we have navigation systems. There's optical guidance, inertial guidance, and digital computers. We actually have different ways to see. So they had to look out little tiny porthole windows to see where they were. Next slide, please. This is the star map. Imagine you're looking through a window that may be 6 inches, maybe as big as 8 inches, and you're trying to pick out, where am I in space? What am I looking at? I'm orbiting the Earth, but all these stars look alike. And they had to memorize this map and know where they were by looking out that little tiny porthole. Next slide. And then this is as they're looking back at Earth. Where am I? So you're going, in this particular picture, you're flying over Africa, North Africa, and then over other places. So South America is on the left, Africa is on the right. So they had to do all that just from that same little tiny porthole window. Next slide. To hear these words, Houston, Tranquility Base, the Eagle has landed. What a marvelous time. Anybody who was alive at that time can probably tell you where they were when they heard those words. But we were so fortunate and so lucky and blessed that this mission was successful, because it started us off on everything else. And now it seems almost like it's easy to do, but it certainly is not easy. Everything when you do in space, it has challenges and is fraught with danger. But thankfully, we keep trying, and we be as safe as we can. And we're going to be going back, as I said, in 2025 to land again on the moon. And why do we care about the moon? One of the things that we just recently discovered is the moon has lots of water on it, particularly in the southern hemisphere. So when you look up at the moon tonight, I don't see water, you don't see water, but there's a lot of water on there. And we didn't know that even just a couple years ago. But water is important because it's made of H2O, 2 hydrogens, 1 oxygen. That becomes rocket fuel and it also becomes air, and it also is water for us to drink. Three things we need to have for our Martian colony are all right there on the moon already waiting for us to go and land to use those resources. What a wonderful thing that is. Next slide. Okay, now to go to Artemis. Artemis is the twin sister of Apollo, and Zeus and Leto are their parents. So Artemis is the goddess of the moon. That's why this mission is going to be called Artemis, and that's with the first woman landing on the moon. That's another reason. Next slide, please. So I have this little boy in a spacesuit because he's going to grow in and fit that spacesuit sometime. So what I want to do is I want to put in his mind the challenges that he's going to have the tools, the math he's going to need, the work he's going to need to put in, so he'll be a very, very successful astronaut.
50 years ago, we went to the moon. We called it Apollo.
What many people don't know is that Apollo had a twin.
She was a woman named Artemis,
goddess of the moon.
We are returning to the moon
as a new generation of explorers.
This time to stay.
And to prepare to achieve humanity's next giant leap of sending the first human missions to Mars.
We believe our course will redefine what is possible.
That we would discover life-saving,
earth-changing science.
And that the challenges ahead will inspire generations.
This is our manifest.
For all who wondered if we could return.
For all who dreamed of pressing beyond.
This is your calling.
We go for all of America.
We go. We go as the Artemis generation.
We go.
Let's start with the basics. Why do we even want to go to the moon again?
I think it's an outpost that we can get to. It's the closest body that we could do, and we don't know enough about it. We look up at it every night, but we don't know a lot about it, so we need to learn more about it. I also think that along the way here, we're testing our human capacity, to see what we can do and not do. So we're testing our brains, we're testing our resolve to be able to accomplish things that seem really difficult, but that we can do them. So I think going to the moon is a good target. If we pick that we have to go to Saturn, that's going to take so long to get there with humans that the moon is far easier to get to, and we can get a lot more work done off the moon. And then we have to learn about microgravity and how our body handles all that. So there's a lot to learn from the moon for us, in particular, our survival. Next slide, or not next slide, just next question.
If microbial life was found on Mars, how would this influence colonization plans or efforts?
Wow. Great question, because we're looking for life in many places across the universe, and we don't know where it is, but we do believe there's life out there. So I have a colleague that was down in Australia last year, came with us, with Jackie's group, that studies extremophiles, and those are, he's looking at Titan, one of the moons of Jupiter, and they think there may be life there, and that would be marvelous if we found it. So wherever we find life out there, we want to study it and protect it, and to make sure that we know a lot about it. It may or may not be carbon-based life forms. It may be something different. So there's wonderful knowledge that we have more questions than answers, which is what makes science so much fun. That, there's always going to be more questions than we have answers, but we will pursue those questions and answers for as long as we possibly can. Next question.
So I'm going to close with, there's literally an overwhelming amount of questions, and they're all excellent. But we get into Elon Musk a little bit.
Okay.
Personal hero of mine. I love this man and his creativity. He's built cars. Now he's building rockets. And the question is, how is a rocket assembled to go into space?
Elon Musk has redefined that, actually. When you think of what he does, he wants to make space travel affordable for everybody. If you lower the cost of putting equipment and people and supplies in space, more people can afford to participate. So when you make something affordable, it democratizes space, the whole space industry. So I'm thankful for what he's doing, like the reusable first stages. That's a huge savings, and he, landed that just spot on a couple of days ago out on a platform in the ocean. That's his ingenuity. That's the team that he has built. That's the way he thinks outside the box. I don't want to throw this first stage away. That's a huge waste. I want to go and recover it and bring it back and reuse it. And he does that. So I'm really proud of that. But it takes, usually there are 2 stages to rockets to go up into space. The first stage burns up the fuel in there, and then they drop the canister that held that fuel, and then they light up the second stage rocket, and that's really what goes out into space. The first stage always comes back to Earth, and then he's reusing it, whereas we never done that before. But so there are 2 stages. First stage comes back to Earth, and the second stage continues on into outer space.
All right. And our last question for tonight. What do you hope to be achieved in terms of space travel for the students' generation? Is there a big dream you would like explored or answered?
I love
this fabulous question.
I love this question, Michael. Thank you. I read it earlier today and just sat and thought for a while of where do I want these kids to be in 10 years? What are they doing? I certainly hope that we have a colony on the moon. It's completely possible. I want to be starting on the colony in Mars. I don't think it's going to happen in that time, but I do think that eventually will happen in the proper time. Everything we do, we have to do when it's safe. There's so much that we need to learn about the human body and space travel and what it's like to be in a colony. So I'm hoping that we'll be on the moon by then, because if we go back in 2025 with the first woman and the next man, there's no reason that we don't continue going to the moon back and back and back over and over again and taking supplies that set things up there. We have to start a farm on the moon. You have to eat. We have to have a habitat. We have to have housing. We have to build structures. And the regolith, the soil that is there on the moon, actually can make bricks as we've done for thousands of years here on Earth. So we have structures we can build with the regolith bricks. We have water, we have fuel, we have air that we can generate. So many things are already there ready for us. And I just can't wait till these kids, these students get to, get their education, get up there and push that envelope and actually colonize the moon, and then with the eye to colonizing Mars too. And I hope that's the dream of some of the students we have today. And even if you're not one that wants to do that, I hope you're encouraging others that do want to. So we can all support each other. Just because Neil Armstrong was the first person to put his foot on the moon, he was not the only one in that program. There were literally tens of thousands of workers that helped him put his boot on that moon. And so there are jobs throughout everywhere, even in Australia, that that will be needed to be very successful. Oh, by the way, I had an earlier question I want to go over with you, Michael, that someone had asked of, are there Australian people working at NASA? There are plenty. At JPL, I know of at least 60 that work at JPL now. They're doing marvelous work all across of JPL, and more are coming. So we have room for you. We want you to come and work with us. But even more importantly, I would like it to be that you get to work in Australia. I don't want you to have to come to America, but I want your industry to grow so well that you can have your jobs there. You can stay home with mom and dad, have your friends, and just you've got great universities there. I've been on many of your campuses, and I want you to succeed right there in Australia. If you want to come to America, please come. You're always going to be welcome. But also I want you to have the option that if you want to work in the space industry in Australia, please do. The guy that runs for Richard Branson, the spaceship company here in California, he just returned to Australia to work with your Australian Space Agency. Enrico Palermo's his name. So look up, in Google, Enrico Palermo. He's a fascinating man, done great things, and he will continue that with his return back to Australia. I think we're probably out of time, Michael.
We are. Tom, I just want to deeply thank you for your commitment to this program, to taking out the time to share with us your passion for spaceflight, and just what a joy it is to get together with you each and every time. Deeply appreciate the time. It's been wonderful once again. And until next time,
all right,
see you all shortly.
I sure appreciate it. Good luck to all you students. I want to say, go, baby, go. You got fans all over America wanting you to be very, very successful and dare mighty things.